Okay, audio level's good. I think it's public, right? Yeah, public. Alright, let's get this show on the road. Start recording. Alright. Good evening, everyone. I am Brody from Team AAMU1, the VEXU team, the Bionic Bulldogs. And this stream, we're going to be taking a look at the game manual for the 2025-2026 season, Pushback. The manual just came out yesterday. Sadly, I was not able to do this stream anytime soon, sooner at least, because I was actually at Worlds with some of the teams that I mentor. And so we are going to get into, first of all, the competition video. For those of you that haven't seen it yet, I doubt that many of you haven't had a chance to at least look at it as of right now, especially if you're watching the stream. So we are going to get into that real quick and get it started.
Welcome to the 2025-2026 Vex V5 Robotics competition, and this year's game, Pushback. Pushback is played on a 12-foot by 12-foot field by two alliances, one red and one blue, made up of two teams each. The primary scoring object is a plastic block. Blocks have 18 sides and measure approximately 3 1/4 inches from any flat surface to its opposite flat surface. There are a total of 88 blocks in each match, 44 red and 44 blue. Blocks can be obtained either from their field starting locations or from one of the 4 loaders that begin pre-populated with 6 blocks each, 3 of each color. There are 4 scoring locations in Pushback, 2 long goals, 1 on each side of the field, and 2 center goals, an upper and a lower. All 4 scoring locations can be used by either alliance. Points are scored by placing blocks inside of goals. Each block scored is worth 3 points. Long goals are capable of holding up to 15 blocks, while center goals can only hold up to 7 blocks. Once a goal is full, scoring a block into one side forces a block out of the opposite side. The alliance with the most blocks in the center section of each long goal will receive a control bonus worth 10 points. But that's not all. Additional control bonuses will also be awarded to the alliance that fills the majority of the upper or lower center goals. All 4 robots must begin the match with 1 block as a preload. Matches begin with a 15-second autonomous period where robots operate without input from their drivers and must stay on their side of the autonomous line. Alliances have the opportunity to earn an autonomous win point by completing a specific set of tasks during the autonomous period. The 1-minute, 45-second driver control period begins once the autonomous bonus winner has been determined. In Pushback, there are no possession limits. Robots are free to possess as many blocks as they please, of either color. At the end of the match, teams can earn additional points by positioning a robot within their alliance's parking zone. One robot inside of the zone receives 8 points. Alliances that are able to fit both of their robots inside the parking zone will receive 30 points. Pushback can also be played in Robot Skills Challenges, the collegiate level VEXU robotics competition, and the Vex AI robotics competition. Check out the game manual for more details. Official rules and game information for Pushback can be found at VexRobotics.com. To register a team, find events near you, or ask a question on the official Q&A, please visit robotevents.com. Good luck and have a great season.
Okay, so of course that was the game reveal video, and so first kind of impressions when I saw this video was, of course, that going through and checking, yes, if you count it up right, you get 15 in the 2 high goals and then 7 in each of the lower goals. So even though there's 88 total game elements this season, you can only fit 44 total between the 4 goals. And so definitely this is more of a control game. I would even argue more so than high stakes, because high stakes you can almost fit many of the game elements, almost all of them in fact, uh, onto the stakes on the field. But here now you can only fit half of them, and so that definitely becomes a lot more of a control game. Second thought also was that this game is a bit like, for those of you that have been competing for many years, change up, especially with the uh, controlling goals, like with the zones. I remember that was the thing that can change up. I don't remember much of that game, like many people, just because that game was not as, you know, that great. I would definitely rank it as my worst, but besides the point. Getting into another thing, of course, you have a parking bonus at the end this year. Although, like, let's kind of get into. Yeah, of course, you have a 10-point control bonus going back to that. So that's 20 points if you can control both of them. Looks like only 3 of these game elements can fit within here, and so it's going to be an odd number regardless. So as long as you can get 2 of them to stay in that control bonus zone on the goals, then that's 20 points you can add to your total. Although it's interesting because if you look at the parking bonus, you know, if we scroll through here real quick. Oh, and one thing real quick, of course, no possession limit. Thank goodness. I am so glad that that's back this year, especially for such a small game element. If they said that you can only possess like 3 or 4, then this game was going to get very stagnant very quickly. But scrolling back through here, again, 1 robot for the parking bonus is 8, but 2 is 30. Scroll back a frame, make it easier to see. So yeah, 2 of them in the parking zone is 30. So a way bigger jump than we saw with the climbing bonus and high stakes, which I enjoy because this actually encourages going for that kind of indie game scramble. It'll be interesting to see, because I've not had a chance to look at the game manual yet, kind of what the time protection, or if there's any protection. I'm pretty sure there probably will be. We'll see what the rules, of course, are with that when it comes to V5 and VEXU as well, because there's not much of a need for vertical expansion this game, because the goals look to be kind of low. And so if we scroll back through here real quick for the scoring, yeah, like this is the hero bot even, and you can see that it's already kind of reaching above the goal. And so the goals definitely aren't 18 inches high. They don't look to be too much higher than just the field border wall, although that could be a little bit of parallax error, or just the kind of viewing angle from right here on the simulation. However, I think it maybe will only be like 12, 13 inches high when we get to looking at the field specs here in a second. And so that'll be interesting to see, because of course bots can be 18 inches tall for the V5RC, but you in VEXU can have a 24-inch robot and a 15-inch robot. Although I think there's not much of a reason for you to build a 24-inch robot this season. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that plays into this year's game. So moving on, like I said, of course, 7 in each tier in the center scoring zone. And it looks like you have, yeah, here it looks like you have a 8 bonus for controlling the top one and a 6 bonus for controlling the bottom one. And so going just based on, basic math for control bonuses, it seems you have 10 points for the control bonuses on the top goals, or the high goals at least. And then for the low goals, it seems to be you have 8 and 6, which is so 14, 10, and 10. So you get 34 points if you control all 4 of the goals. And then, of course, you get the 3, we'll have to figure out a name for the elements, I guess, in the stream. I've not really looked at the forums or anything to see if they've come up with one quite yet. But at least for each game element scored, it's 3 points, of course, as I mentioned here at the beginning of the video. I think it was... Where'd they mention that? Yeah, I think
8 points.
right here. Yeah, it's 3 points per ball scored, or I'll just refer to them as balls for now, just because it's a lot easier, because they are kind of somewhat spherical shaped. Just, yeah, moving on. But moving into the scoring,
Long goals.
seeing 3 of these game elements being able to fit into the control area, I wonder if you're going to see a lot of robots possibly extending horizontally. I'll have to look and see if there is a horizontal expansion limit. I'm pretty sure they probably will have one from Vex, but it'll be interesting to see, because it looks like this small part here is open. So you could possibly reach into the top here and then push game elements in. That may be intentional by Vex. Although if it is not, then I wouldn't be surprised if we saw to where they came out and said, okay, like, you cannot extend into the top. You can only score in this first 3 or 4 inches maybe of the goals. So now let's see. And yeah, of course, a lot of more standard rules apply, and so I'm not going to really try to get into those because they're mostly well known. I did see one of the clarifications that they made yesterday at the closing ceremony for V5, VEXU, and JROTC was that this decal here in the center, those tiles are actually included in the game element kit, or with the game element kit. However, there is no need, like, these are just decals, like, you can replace them with just standard field tiles. They're just there, I guess, mainly to make the unveil look, you know, more aesthetically pleasing, I guess. But in reality, there's no real function to them. You're not having, as I said, you're not really having to get out the arts and crafts and, you know, make sure that they do line up perfectly. So that actually is really good, because it seemed like a lot of people were asking about that. So for the most part, it looks like all you'll have tape-wise, at least for the V5 middle school, high school, and JROTC levels, is just these 2 white lines running down the middle, which makes it really easy to set up or replace tape if it does get torn up. Although I did hear that there will be a different VEXU configuration for the tape. And so we might actually see to where robots can actually interact with one another in the center. I think that actually was clarification also made, although that could have also just been something I heard again. It's been a minute since I've really looked at all of this stuff. So, and I also did kind of look at the shout out to 355Z Falcons, because they did release a video showing off kind of some of the dimensions of the field ahead of time before the game manual release, and so I did take some of that into consideration. I do think they said that these long goals, sit 12.5 inches above the ground, if I'm not mistaken. And so that wouldn't be too far off from the 12 inches on the field perimeter. So, and then of course I think these side goals here for the loading stations were about 20 inches tall-ish. But we'll see that here in a second, because of course I have the game manual open over here. I've not really had a chance to look through a lot of it. I was mainly looking up the parking bonus earlier to see if there's anything there. But I think we will go ahead and get into the game manual now, especially since we're almost 15 minutes into the stream. Let's see now. So now, getting into the game manual. Alright, so of course we have, you know, the changelog, standard. Then you have quick reference guide, mainly just quicker table of contents. Then of course they have the dates for the updates. The dates for Worlds actually are April 20th through 30th, I believe, at the America's Convention Center in St. Louis next year. For those of you that don't know yet. And so April 9th, or well, yeah, one thing that Vex has mentioned that they're doing different this year is that there will be a delay between the release date and then effective date going into next season. So teams and coaches will basically have a week from the release date of a version update to get adjusted, to adjust your strategy. That way, you're basically not having to learn the entire manual new right before a weekend competition. I know it's an issue that we kind of had last season with when we ran a competition because it was right after the version 3.0 update. And so that was the one, of course, where they released the 30-second protected period at the very end of a match instead of a 15-second protected period to encourage tier 3 climbing or just climbing in general. However, teams didn't really have time to adjust before that weekend, and so I think Vex didn't really handle it the best. And if they had implemented this last season, or if they had released the 30-second protected zone at like version 2, then I think that would have encouraged it a little bit more, because even at finals and worlds, we did not see very much climbing, let alone tier 2 and 3. And so that's something I think that Vex may have overestimated last season. But with the parking, I think they simplified it a lot more this season to encourage that, and especially increasing the parking bonus from 8 to 30 points. And so I do think that early season we will definitely see teams going for not only a single park, but a double park as well. And one thing being that for VEXU, of course, since you can build both robots, you can make them to easily get that 30 points at the very end of the match for the double park. For V5, on the other hand, it's a little bit harder. Although you could potentially just see a ramp bot who can mainly play defense, and let's just say that they have, like, I don't know, 8 or 10 wheel drive, and just throw all 8 motors into their drivetrain. Maybe even not necessarily lifting, because I think lifting is illegal. Or maybe I'll have to check. We'll check the rules here in a second just to make sure. But you could see early on a chassis bot essentially kind of dominating competition, playing really good defense, and even potentially scoring into this low goal, because the low goal does not look like it's off the ground very much, if at all. And you could probably very effectively push some of these game elements into this low goal here, if you can kind of corral them into the front of your robot, or just have like a low intake on your robot to where another robot can still ramp up onto you, but it gives you enough of a profile to be able to get those game elements into the low goal here. So I could definitely see something. Let's see. For example, if you had a lower profile drivetrain than this, say not using the 4-inch wheels, but using like 3-inch or 2-inch wheels, and then you had this kind of intake style laying flat, and it was more like a belt, kind of like this, or a chain kind of conveyor like there was last season, then I could definitely see where kind of like the Vex change. Actually, no. Crap, what a hit.
Alright, what's up, guys? This is
Probably more like a Vex Tower takeover robot would be. Let's see now. I think Pyro's pretty good. Let me just kind of. But basically, like, these style intakes I could see being used this season a lot more than the flex wheels potentially, because they can be made lower profile, and especially with some of these intakes from Tower Takeover, the way that they flexed open, you don't have to make them flex as much as for the cubes, because I think, see, what does the game manual say for the game piece size? Because, see, now we'll just kind of scroll down here, maybe. Yeah, so the max dimension on these is only 3.84, which is still less than 4 inches. And the minimum dimension is 3.23 flat to flat. So potentially, if you just use bigger flaps, or like a mixture of like the big and small flaps, probably the bigger ones would be better. But if you set your intake wide enough and just use the bigger flaps, then you can still grab onto the game elements no matter which way you are facing them, or which way they are, yeah, no matter which way they are oriented in comparison to your robot. So looking at this, I could definitely see change-up robots, tower takeover robots, making a bit of a comeback early in the season. I could even see potentially the hero bot actually being effective this season. You know, that's actually a surprise. Vex made a pretty decent hero bot this season, and so that's going to be very interesting to see. Let's see now if I can find a halfway decent change-up robot. See, like, the thing is, change-up robots, of course, we're using flex wheels, but those balls were a lot bigger. And so I think that's why a lot more people use flex wheels, is because they were a constant diameter, no matter what orientation they were in, because they were fully spherical. But when it comes to this year, on the other hand, I don't think that's going to be as much the case. Let's see, there's not really a good one to look at that I can find at the moment. Just kind of looking through these. That's spin up. That's not what I'm looking for. This one looks like it has flaps on it, so I'll. But yeah, this is a robot in 3 days, which I'm not sure if our team will attempt to do that, but we might. But let's see now. And so this is 210Y Robotics, and the other one I think was Pyro as well, just for the credits in case we need that. So, you know, chat box doesn't really seem to be working, so I'm just going to disable that. Alright. And so yeah, you can kind of see the chain flaps here that people were using back in Change Up, and so I could definitely see those making a comeback. It would not surprise me in the slightest. So, you know, so mainly looking through the game manual, of course, you have some of your basic stuff as far as like, you know, like mainly your sportsmanship rules and stuff like that. So going to the field overview, of course, you have 88 blocks, 44 blue, 44 red, 2 preloads each, 12 match loads each, 18 that will be in predetermined locations, and then 12 that will be starting the match at the loaders, with your alliance color on the bottom on your side, with the opposing alliances on top. And we will get into the we'll get into some of the more main rules here. Of course, you have your audience view layout that is very helpful for people that are setting up and doing field setup for next season. Very helpful. Okay, so here you have, of course, your stacks. A lot easier setup this year, because it purely is just, you know, your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, so 8 game elements of the opposing alliance color that'll be closest to your alliance station. And then your color will be around the central square here, where the center goal is at. And again, those field tiles will be included with the game elements. Or not game elements, but the field elements. And they are not necessarily, they can just be regular Vex tiles. So if they get scuffed up or, you know, broken or anything like that, perfectly fine. Let's see. So, oh, hey, chat box is working now. Yay. Okay. Oh crud, I don't have it really working right now, or I can't really see it. All right. So, getting back into the loading stations, as you can see, blue on top for the red side, red on bottom though, so it's 3 and 3. So I think from what I've seen, um, see now, for I was trying to remember. Oh yeah, for autonomous win point, probably what's going to happen is that you're going to have to get the bottom 3, maybe on one side, possibly on both sides out. So we'll have to see what that looks like here in a second. And of course, they have audience view, and they also have recommended field monitor positions. Which luckily this year, since there's nothing on the walls, and there shouldn't be any problem with having them almost above the walls or like right next to the field. So of course you have general game definitions of what adult is, alliance, line station, autonomous bonus. We're just gonna kind of skip through some of this stuff. Disablement, disqualification, draft team member, entanglement, field perimeter, what the floor is, the GDC, and then they of course have your holding, which can be trapping, pinning, or lifting. So of course, going back to what I was talking about earlier about a ramp bot, that could be falling under lifting, especially for the most part. And so when it comes to lifting, that's one thing that we'll have to look at in GG17. Actually, let's see, now what page are we on right now? 22. I'll just actually go down real quick to GG17. So yeah, no holding for more than a 5 count. So it looks like still same rules as before. Okay, it looks like they're just calling them blocks, and so I'll just refer to them as blocks from now on. So scroll back up to page 22, where I was at. And then, of course, you have your definitions still for match, autonomous, and driver control period. And, of course, it gives you the breakdown of, match type for the specific rules, and then autonomous, driver control, links, stuff like that. Driving skills match, especially for V5, not VEXU. Keep in mind, these are the times. VEXU and V5 for skills is actually the same amount of time, 1 minute, either way, for driving or autonomous. So one team, one robot, of course, for V5 for both driving and autonomous. VEXU, of course, you have 2 teams with 2 robots each, and competition head-to-head. And then for driving and autonomous skills, you have 1 team with 2 robots. And then, of course, it tells you how long the autonomous period and driver periods are. And so, as you can see here, 1 minute autonomous period for... That says... Wait, scroll back up here. That said driving... Didn't it? Hold up. Yeah, this says driving, but they have it under autonomous, and so I guess that in the next couple of weeks they'll have to get that fixed. So swap the time here from, swap this 1 minute to here and this 1 minute to here, I guess, in order to set those right. And then you have the Vex AI robotics competition head-to-head. I actually want to see more of this because I've not really seen much for Vex AI, but I would love to see more of it. So, what's the rule on sticking things inside of the goal? I'm gonna get to that here in a bit because I'm just kind of going through the manual in order, just to make it a little easier on myself. Because if I start jumping around, then I'll forget what I've covered, what I haven't. I wouldn't doubt if that's one of the first things that if they don't have it in here, then they'll clarify it. So let me see. Of course, definition of what a robot is, students, clarifying all that. And another thing with sticking stuff inside the goals, it could even be different rules between VEXU and V5. So that's one thing that we'll have to look at real quick once we get down there. So, of course, timeout for elimination. Again, a bunch of the stuff is mostly the same stuff as in previous decision matrix, basically, for determining whether infraction should be major or minor violation for refs. And then getting down here to game-specific definitions. Okay, so these are just called blocks. So I was just calling them game elements earlier, but they are blocks. And, of course, you have your autonomous line, still consistent with previous years, of course. You have your long goal, control zone, holds up to 3 blocks. Same thing we saw in the game reveal video. control zone for center goal, of course, is the entire goal, holds up to 7 blocks. You know, that works. I would love to see, though, what the rulings are. If you have 3 and 3, probably, in the lower goal, or like a even number on either side of like, or a matching number on either side, like 3 red, 3 blue, 2 red, 2 blue, whatever, then it probably just doesn't go to anyone, and it's just those points for the individual game elements or the individual blocks that get counted. Let's see now. Yeah, control, that's easy enough to figure out. Autonomous and end of the match. Okay, so control zones are assessed at the end of autonomous period. That is good to know. So if you get 3 in here during the autonomous period, that does count. I know that I think the positive corner did not count for V5 at the end of last season. I think VEXU, the positive corner, did count during autonomous, but in V5 it did not. So it's nice to see that they are clarifying here that the control zone will be included in autonomous and at the end of the match. And of course, they same basic thing, explain what the goal is. What the long goal, it's 48.8 inches long. 13.33 inch enclosed center. Yeah, holds 15 blocks. Okay, so let's go down here to the loader real quick, because we haven't had match loads in a little bit. Because really there wasn't match loads, of course, in high stakes. There wasn't really match loads in, what's called? Really many of the previous years. But looking at it, of course, they are tall plastic and rubber structures, each attached to the field perimeter. Robots may remove blocks from loaders during a match, and drive team members may add match load blocks to loaders during the match. See SG9 for details. We'll see that in a minute. And each loader can hold up to 6 blocks. So match load, that will be, there's 12 blocks per alliance that you can load in during the match. And then parked, we'll get down one to see SC4. We'll get clarification on that. Park zone, a field element that marks the location where blocks begin a match and robots can be parked at the end of the match. So, yeah, basically just this perimeter here on either side of the field, and then scored. We'll see that here in a second once we get down here to scoring, and that's SC2. Autonomous bonus this year has actually been bumped. It's 10 points as compared to 6 last season, partially because I think you have higher scoring potential this season, so that's interesting to see, especially with 44 blocks each. If you somehow score all 44 of yours, that already will be 144 times 3. I think that's 152 if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check my math, because that'd be 132. I said 152. Wow. So yeah, that'll be 132 if you somehow score all of your elements. And so we will definitely see, I'd say, closer matches. Definitely nothing close to a max score potentially, unless just the other robots on the opposing alliance cannot score at all. So that will be interesting to see. So yeah, SC1, same as previous seasons, to where, all scoring is done after the match, except for at the end of autonomous. Blocks considered score if it meets the following criteria. So a block has to be in contact with the inside surface of a goal. It is not in contact with the robot, of the same color as the block. So if it is a blue block that is being supported by a red robot, it does count as scored, so long as it is not in contact with the floor and it is in contact with the inside surface of a goal. That is kind of interesting, and I want to see how many times that comes up, and potentially for us to miss it later on in the season, or early on in the season at least. Maybe not later on in the season. So now, moving on, control zone, of course, is pretty easy to figure out. Just whoever has more blocks in that control zone. It looks like that it must be between the white lines to be counted, because if, the tape line, boundary, they have to fall in between that. in order to be scored. In most cases, if you can't see a little bit of the block of the next block on the inside of the tape line, the block on that side of the control zone probably is entirely contained within the control zone. Okay. Okay, here is the parking criteria. This is going to be kind of important. SC4, a robot is considered park if it meets all the following criteria. Not contacting the floor outside its alliance colored park zone. That is definitely going to be something to take into account. Ah, crap, I just clicked that. Did not mean to. And then the robot is not contacting any field elements other than, that is also important, other than the inside face of the field perimeter. So not this outside face, has to be the inside face. The floor inside of its alliance colored park zone, so just this small area here is all that it can be in contact with, and or the plastic extrusions and connectors that are part of the park zone. Contact with these elements is not required. And then the robot is at least partially within the vertical projection of its alliance colored park zone. And of course, that basically, I would say that means that the planes for the park zone, probably like with Tower Takeover, they extend up infinitely, or vertically infinitely. So just part of your robot needs to be in there, and you need to be not contacting the floor on the outside. That will be interesting to see, especially in VEXU, where you might have one robot just lift up the other essentially, and then just barely have it over the plane in the zone. So then, scoring of the autonomous bonus. So points for parked robots are not included in the calculation. Okay, so that's what they're excluding instead of the control zones. So parked robots are not included for the autonomous bonus. If the autonomous period ends in a tie, including 0-0 tie, then each alliance will get 5 points. Any violations, as in every year since, or every year previous, will be any violation by an alliance, you automatically forfeit it to the opposing alliance. And then per GG13, which we'll see here in a minute, if both alliances commit, or actually GG13 I think is actually back up, or no, it actually is down. Alright, we'll see that in a minute then. Both alliances commit violations during an autonomous period, then no autonomous points will be awarded to either alliance. Alright, so SC6, of course, autonomous win point. This is important for rankings, and so you must have at least 7 blocks of the alliance's colors scored. At least 3 different goals include at least 1 scored blocks of the alliance color, so you have to score in 3 of the different goals. That will also be interesting to see. Then at least 3 blocks have been removed from the loader. Okay, so yeah, at least 3 blocks. I think that's what I mentioned earlier. And then neither robot is contacting the park zone barrier. So basically, for the barrier, you have to make sure that you are not in contact with it at the end of autonomous. If your autonomous messes up and you come into contact with it, then you will not get the autonomous 1 point. Basic safety rules, I'm just going to speed through those because they're pretty much the same as usual. General rules, also pretty much the same. So I'm going to just kind of skip through here. General game rules, G1 or GG1, same as usual. GG2, yeah. So yeah, this is of course rules going over like robots must be ready to play once they reach the field. So of course we had at Worlds, I was surprised that there was a lot of teams that were trying to sit there and air up their robots on the field, like after they already placed them. But as you can see here, GG3A, it very clearly says teams who use Vex pneumatics must have their systems charged. Here's the word: before they place the robot on the field. So yes, any team, make sure that you please air up before you get to the field, because that can cause a delay for the rest of the time. Hands out of the field, again, another thing I was surprised at Worlds that people kept I guess just unknowingly reaching into the field or like reaching over the field perimeter wall. And so GG5, there actually was a replay. In fact, one of my, or at least one replay that I knew of, because there was a decision made by the referees to where they messed up and DQ'd the wrong alliance, or the wrong team on the wrong alliance. And that was actually one of the teams that I mentor. They were in that match, and so they had to replay it. It was middle school Innovate Division, I believe, match 138 maybe, I think, or somewhere in there. Alright, so those can happen, but as I say, replays are allowed, but rare. So now proceeding on, disqualifications, scores, timeouts, keep your robot together, don't clamp your robot to the field. This is a new rule. Red Alliance places last. The Red Alliance has the right to place its robots on the field last to qualification and elimination matches. Or at least this is probably a rule that's been here before. It's never really come up a lot. And so I think especially we're going to probably see this in VEXU more so than Vex V5. Because I think there is an interaction, like I said, I think there's an interaction zone for robots in autonomous. So we shall see. So yeah, once a team has placed its robot on the field, its position should not be adjusted prior to the match. Of course, many teams sit there and they try to get their robots adjusted using like jigs and stuff like that to make sure that they have the robots placed properly. As long as you're not taking too egregious long a time, I think that some refs will be perfectly fine with you trying to get your robot just in the perfect spot. So yeah, controllers must stay connected to the field. Autonomous means no humans. Or will still apply in the autonomous period. Don't destroy the robots. Offensive robots get benefit of the doubt. You can't force an opponent into a penalty. No holding for more than 5 counts. Use blocks to play the game. Alright, so specific game rules. Of course, no larger than 18. Not contacting any blocks other than the preload. No contacting any goals or loaders. Not contacting any other robots. Completely stationary at the start of a match. Contacting the barrier that defines their alliance's park zone. Okay, so it looks like you do have to be contacting the barrier for the park zone, and that's probably why Vex added in the no contacting the park zone for the autonomous win point, because you do start contacting it. That's going to be interesting to see, because that means that robots will be a lot closer together than in previous seasons. So that'll be fun to see how robots interact with one another going into next season. Alright, moving on. Alright, here's a real big one. SG2, horizontal expansion is limited. Once the match begins, robots may expand horizontally beyond the 18 by 18 starting size limit within the following criteria. No horizontal dimension may exceed 22 inches at any point during the match. That is interesting. Usually Vex has it as 24 inches, or at least something a little easier to measure, but instead they have it at 22 inches this season. That is going to be a headache, because I do not know if Vex makes a 22-inch sizing tool. So I can imagine, especially early in the season, there's going to be a lot of tape measure and jig configuring to be done. So let's see. Yeah, horizontal distance measure between any 2 points of the robot, including diagonals relative to the playing field. Okay. So vertical expansion is limited, of course. Once the match begins, robots may expand vertically beyond the 18-inch starting size. And it looks like no part of the robot may exceed an overall height of 22 inches at any point during the match. For vertical, kind of odd. I doubt that you'll have any reason to expand beyond the 18 inches after the start of a match, but who knows? This limit refers to the vertical distance from the field or structures of the park zones while moving across them to the highest point of the robot and does not rotate with the robot. Now that I think about it, I am not quite sure. It says no part of the robot may exceed an overall height of 22 inches. And it says that the limit refers to the vertical distance from the field to the highest point of the robot. And so I guess you can't just lift a robot over your head in order to get the so yeah, I guess that means that basically there's a 22-inch ceiling now this season. Okay. Okay. That's going to be interesting to see then how people consistently measure that throughout the season. So, of course, keep blocks in the field, yada yada. Each robot gets 1 block as preload. Robot may carry, push, or plow an unlimited number of blocks. Thankfully, that's going to be a lot easier to measure than in high stakes. Don't cross the autonomous line. Don't interfere with your opponent's actions. Engage with the autonomous line at your own risk. Match loads may be introduced during the match under certain conditions. So basically, blocks may only be added to loaders during the driver control period of the match. A match load may not be contacted by a robot prior to being placed into the loader. Match load blocks may only be removed from a loader by a robot and only through the bottom opening of the ladder or loader. Oh, I'm tired. Don't reach inside enclosed sections of the goals. So robots are not permitted to directly affect the position of blocks that are within enclosed sections of the goals, but may add or remove blocks from open sections of the goals at any time during a match. Park zones are protected during the end game, so this is important. SG11. Park zones are protected during the end game. During the last 20 seconds of a match, robots may not directly or indirectly contact the other alliance's park zone or opponent robots that are parked in that zone. Alright. So now moving on to the robot. Of course, a lot of these are the same rules that we have seen before. So I'm just going to kind of skip through some of these. Of course, must fit within 18 by 18 inch volume. Must have your license plates. That surprised me at Worlds that teams were still losing their license plates. I did see, what was it? Oh, really? See, I'd heard about this, but this is interesting. License plates must be placed in fixed locations on exactly 2 horizontally opposing sides of the robot and must remain visible, legible, and attached for the entirety of the match. The top of a robot is not considered a side for these 2 license plates. Ah, crud. I mean, actually, now that I think about it, probably that's been the rule before, but teams have had their license plates on moving parts before, and just, I guess, no one's really addressed it. Let's see now. Robots must pass inspection. Wait, yeah. So for the license plates, move during match. The function of license plates is to identify robots for referees, spectators, and other teams. Identification is harder when the license plate on a robot moves during a match. License plates must be attached to the robot using materials that are legal for robot construction, as VEXU pins are no longer legal for use on V5RC robots. That is interesting. Robots may only include license plates that match their alliance color for the current match. That's standard. License plates are considered functional components. Must meet the requirements of all robot rules. Additional license plates cannot be used on the robot for any purpose. Okay, so if you have your you can't have an extra license plate with like a team name or something like that on it. If you don't just use your standard team number. Must be in white font and clearly legible. Alright, so then R7, you must let go of blocks after the match. Robots must be designed to permit easy removal of blocks from any mechanism without requiring the robot to have to power after a match. That was a problem. Definitely at Worlds was that we had several teams that their robots you had to power off in order to get their pneumatics to deactivate in order to remove mobile goals or rings sometimes. And so that's one that I'm hoping people will pay closer attention to next season and enforce to a higher degree. Robots, of course, can only have one brain. Must keep the power button accessible. Of course, have the most updated version of XOS and all that type of stuff. Use competition template for programming. And then you have motors limited to where you can only use, still a max of 88 watts. Let's see. Vex batteries only. Robots use Vex nets. Apparently there were people using Bluetooth. I think that they were mainly just using it for skills though, and then they forgot to swap back, and that caused problems with the match fields. So definitely pay attention to that next season. I don't think many people are gonna have to worry about the vision sensor because that's not used too much. Make sure that your radio is able to communicate well. 1 or 2 controllers per robot. Still standard stuff. Built from the V5 system. New Vex parts are legal. Of course, just make sure that you look and check the website. I definitely recommend that. Just make sure. Then you have a list of prohibited items. Certain non-Vex components are allowed. I think. Do they have? I heard something about the polycarb. Is that up here? No. Prohibited items? No. Where is the... I might have skipped past it, so we might have to go back and look. Decorations are allowed. Oh, no, here it is. R25. A limited amount of custom plastic is allowed. This is something new. So, teams, make sure that you do pay attention to this rule, because now you can only have 12 individual pieces cut from a non-shattering plastic, and each individual piece of non-shattering plastic cannot be larger than 4 by 8 inches. I know there were some robots at Worlds that had an entire chassis rail made from plastic, and so that is no longer going to be the case unless you have a really small drivetrain or use multiple pieces connected together. Let's see now. So yeah, teams. Okay, so you can mark them in order to count them. Inspectors verify that non-shattering pieces did not exceed. So they can be cut, drilled, bent, cannot be chemically treated, melted, or cast, but heating to aid in bending is acceptable. They, of course, give a list of legal pieces. This rule does not apply to 3D printed plastic parts. 3D printed parts are not permitted in V5RC. Of course, they are allowed in VEXU, so that's the important thing. Pneumatics, of course, still limited. Most modifications to non-electrical systems are allowed, but no modifications to electronics or pneumatic components are allowed, except for like cutting down tubes to the size of stuff that you need and things like that. Alright, so robot skills, robot skills match, autonomous coding. So all the definitions mostly still the same. Standard rules apply. scoring is a little bit different, of course. Each block score, it looks like, is 1 point. Each field control zone in a long goal is 5 points. Each field control zone in a center goal is 10 points. Each cleared park zone is 5 points. Each clear loader is 5 points. And a parked robot is 15 points. And again, this is for V5, and so we are definitely going to see quite a few high scores, possibly even max, I would imagine. Because, what does the layout look like? Yeah, the layout looks a lot more simplified. So you still do have stacks, of course, and remember in skills you are driving from the red zone. But it looks like they are not making any differentiation between the red and blue blocks. So it looks like you can just score any blocks regardless. And then, yeah, so I could definitely see teams. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I definitely think we'll see a max score potentially this season. Robot and field setup for skills matches, of course, revised block layout with only 36 blocks. With 24 of them being in the loaders. Skill stop time, of course, same rules pretty much apply, I feel like, there. Alright, now getting into the tournament. A lot of these are the same definitions as before. Yeah, okay. Then, oh, that's one of them. Okay, tournament rules. Head referees have final say on stuff. Head referees must be qualified. Drop team members are allowed to appeal decisions immediately after a match. Event partner has ultimate authority regarding all non-gameplay decisions. Be prepared for minor field variance. Good grief. Fields could be repaired at the discretion of the event partner. Fields must be consistent with each other. Oh, good grief. Hit that again. Let's scroll back down here. Scroll back up here. Must be consistent. Okay, that's where I was. 3 types of field control that could be used. Of course, that being the VexNet field controller, a V5 Event Brain, which is mostly the new one, or VexNet competition switch. Definitely recommend not using that last one unless you absolutely that's the only thing you have and cannot get anything else in time. 2 types of field perimeter may be used. Definitely recommend the portable one. A lot easier to put together. Qualification matches, of course. Each team will have at least 6 qualification matches. Qualification matches help determine your ranking for alliance selections. Their qualification match tiebreakers, of course. Fewer alliances, small tournaments, of course. Then, okay, basically just how to do, standard. Yeah, it seems like some mostly standard after that. Okay, so now let me actually scroll back up here because I need to see for the game, is there a rule about reaching in to, or maybe that'll fall under game specific rules. Maybe specific game rules. Okay, so starting a match, horizontal expansion is limited, vertical expansion is limited, keep blocks in the field, each robot gets 1 block as preload, don't cross autonomous line, Gauge the autonomous line on list. Match loads may be introduced. Okay, yeah, specifically don't reach inside enclosed sections of the goals. Okay, I must not have clarified that one earlier. So yeah, you cannot reach inside enclosed sections of the goals. But going back to which section was it? Yeah, going back here, it says that the only the center 13.33, we'll just say 13 and a half section in the center is enclosed. So in theory, as of the way that the rules are written at this time, you could reach all the way up to this enclosed section here in the center. So that'll be interesting to see if teams do try to push blocks further. Although given that you can only have 4 inches of expansion, I doubt it, because currently the way that I'm looking at this is that, okay, in order to reach into there, your robot would have to be undersized in order to give yourself more reach, because the 4 inches that you could reach is basically just this first section right here that does not have any blocks, or that blocks can be loaded into. And so you're almost just better off trying to load another block in instead of trying to line up and push the blocks further in. Yeah, I think that's really the only way, because, well, there's a way I could see you could do it, but it wouldn't really be practical, and I don't think most teams would be keen on risking breaking the top plane of vertical expansion potentially in order to accomplish that. So let's scroll back down to the VEXU game rules. So yeah, VEXU. This is what our team is going to be more concerned with, and so holy cow, I've already been streaming an hour. Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to try and shorten this potentially. Alright, so for VEXU, of course, you can have additional electronics. Your alliance is your own team because you build two bots. So you are your own alliance. You can have external processors. You can have electromechanical assemblies. You can have a lot more fabricated parts. There is a neutral zone. This is what I heard about for field setup, that you do have a neutral zone where it cuts, and pretty much the 4 squares in the center are a neutral zone, along with the half squares of like the outer ones. So that is a neutral zone where you can have robots essentially interacting with one another during autonomous, and if they interfere with one another and mess up their autonomous in that zone, it is perfectly okay, from the way I understood it when they explained it. So that is definitely going to be interesting to see. And one important thing, of course, is that the VEX GPS code strip must be installed on the field for VEXU events. Let's see. So, of course, a little bit different of a field setup, to where instead of blocks being just here. Ooh, that is interesting. Okay, so they're encouraging a lot more. Yeah, they're pretty much forcing the robots to interact with one another in the center, which I feel like is going to be ultimate chaos during autonomous then. So early season, at least, probably best bet is just grab the blocks in your starting zone, or in your starting loading zone, and then rush for the center. That way you don't have to worry about being interfered with, and you can have a lot more consistent autonomous. So, Okay, so you can in VEXU add the match loads to your bot during the autonomous period. So that is interesting. Different autonomous win point criteria, of course. You have to have at least 12 blocks scored instead of, I think, the 7. Then you have to have at least 3 different goals, include at least 1 scored block of the alliance color. I think that's the same. The 6 blocks of the alliance's color at the beginning and the match loaders have to be removed instead of just 3. And then you have to have at least 1 robot is parked in the park zone for VEXU instead of none of your robots touching that field perimeter. Or not the field perimeter, but the parking zone perimeter. That's definitely going to be interesting to see. Let's see now. So, yeah, don't cross the autonomous line. And don't interfere with your opponent's actions. But then, of course, I follow it up with engaging the autonomous line and neutral zone at your own risk. Because it sounds like, yeah, this one replaces the first paragraph of SG8. Should be aware that opponent robots may also choose to do the same. Coming into the center zone, robots entering the neutral zone should expect contact with other robots and should take this into consideration when designing and building. However, GG14 still applies within the neutral zone, and you can receive a disablement or major violation for actions that a head referee deems intentionally damaging or egregious. So that is something to be aware at. Personally, I think that it's just better to go for the side goals and then like maybe the lower goal potentially. Probably just go for like the lower or top goal with your first, like your match load, or not match load, but your preload at the beginning of the match to score there, and then probably retreat back to the safe zone, and then get the ones out of your loading zone, and then just score those into the long goal. Because looking at it, I just realized this for some reason. Don't know why it didn't occur to me before, but you pretty much have a straight shot between your loading zone and your scoring in the long goal. Part of me wonders if it might be worth it to just grab all 6 in the loading zone. Just grab all 6 of those and then back up, deposit them all into the control zone. Because yes, that would give 9 points. Or well, those points would basically offset from 3 and 3 for each alliance. But on the other hand, you would then have your 3, or at least you'd only be, I think, 1. Or no, because then you'd have your match load, so you'd have 7. So yeah, you would cover over half of the. Yeah, you could almost just guarantee. Yeah, you could almost just guarantee the control zone at the end of autonomous that way. So that'll be pretty easy to figure out. We'll see if teams decide to go for that easy. That would be an easy 20 points if you could do both robots for VEXU at the beginning of a match. And so that would almost win you autonomous guaranteed. So that'd be. Let's see now. That would basically be a guaranteed 30 points between just the control zone, the control zone on both long goals, and then the 10 points from autonomous. That would be interesting to see. So basically, your opposing alliance would have to risk you not going into that neutral zone, and then that would basically be their only way to score, essentially. So that will be definitely interesting to see. Because thinking about it, the opposing alliance would have to score. Let's see now. In order to offset it, they'd have to score all 3 Well, actually, no, it wouldn't be too bad, yeah. Okay, that'll be interesting to see, actually. So thinking about it, it may be more worth it to actually deposit all of the blocks in the loader into the center goals. That probably would be better, because if you do that, then you can do your 6 what is it? You can then do your 6 in the match loads and then deposit them into the upper chambers. So yeah, there's actually a couple different ways I could see people doing autonomous potentially. I don't know. That's getting into game strategy, though, not as much the game manual itself. Let's go on. So where was I? Okay, no, I think I was actually right here. Okay, so rule modifications for the game itself, different robot placement rules in GG10. Ooh, so red team has the right to place one robot on the field first, then both blue robots, then the second red robot. So, ooh, that's going to be interesting to see. This applies in qualification matches and elimination matches. If this right is used, once the team has placed a robot on the field, its position cannot be readjusted prior to the match. Ooh. So you'd basically have to make sure that your autonomous is fully consistent if you invoke that right. Ooh. Okay. So different expansion. Okay, so the 24-inch robot can expand up 24 inches horizontally or vertically at any time during the match. Different availability of loaders. Of course, drive team members may add match load blocks to the loaders during autonomous period. Different autonomous win point criteria. Actually, no, I already went over that, didn't I? Yeah. Don't cross the autonomous line. Yeah, gauge. Okay, don't know. I just went back over all that. Wow, I am tired. Okay, so you can't actually have cooling fans active at the beginning of a match. Robot skills. Same field layout and tape lines as a head-to-head match. Okay, that's interesting. So it looks like you can actually run skills at a V5RC event. Might not be available at all events, and the VURC team should communicate with the event partner in advance to discuss options. Okay. So, yeah, definitely if you're another VEXU team, take advantage of this. I know that we didn't know about this at the beginning of last season, but just for anyone that happens to see this. Of course, must start the robot in legal starting positions for the Red Alliance. All other portions of SG1 apply. And you can use both of your robots. So yeah, that's definitely going to be interesting for the same setup and scoring and skills. Okay, so rule modifications in tournament. I think most of this is standard. Yeah. Yeah, most of that's just standard. Teams may use 2 robots. Yeah. Any official Vex products. Fabricated parts. Stuff that is and isn't considered raw stock. Yeah. Yeah. So most of this is still just, except for, of course, well, I mean, this is standard for VEXU, but yeah, no restriction on the amount of motors that you can use. No restriction on sensors, processors, or other commercially available electromechanical assemblies are not legal. Oh my good grief. Where was I? Yeah, here, and then commercially available bearings, stuff like that, yada yada, and then team composition, regular stuff. Okay, so now you get field overview, field bomb, and field spec, of course, here at the very end. Let's look real quick. Yeah, I'm just gonna kind of scroll past this. Yeah, and then extra little bits of field setup and notes and stuff like that to make sure that you're setting up the field right. Then of course here's the page 120 is the one with, or A15 I guess, if you're looking at this, for the block specs, and then the individual goal specs. Yeah, the first 4 inches is available for loading, of course. So yeah, if you're gonna reach in for the center of the top portion on the long goals, it looks like you have a little under 2 inches to reach in. Another reason why I don't think it's worth it, because you got to be super precise with that. Then, so, park zone spec is essentially 17 by 19, and it's an inch tall, so really you need to make sure that you have quite a pretty high clearance in comparison to some previous seasons, but definitely not as much as over under. But if you're going to try going over the center bar, but definitely will be a little hard to climb if you are riding close to the ground. Then loader spec, of course, is 21 inches tall, so nearly 22, so you really can't very easily get to the top of that without violating the height restriction. Let's see now. Field critical specs. Of course, these are standard for the fields, and it looks like that's the last of it. Alright, so what else was I gonna do? Yeah, I think for now I'm just gonna leave things here, because I've already been streaming for a little over an hour and 15 minutes, closer to an hour and 18, I think is what this is saying. And so I'm going to log off here then, and then probably tomorrow if I have time, or a couple days from now, I will upload a bit more on robot design, because I know that I mentioned the change up and tower takeover robots, but maybe I'll be able to do like a sketch up or something, or like a rough draft sketch on paper or something, and then show a photo of that so that teams can get a better idea of what's going on. But also I'll probably be streaming on Wednesday, because that is when the VEXU also releases both the game video and the game manual, I believe. And then I can do this whole process over again. And it will be a bit more refined, luckily, because by that time this setup will be finished, and hopefully the stream and everything will be a lot better, and I'll be able to manage that one a little better, because it won't be near as late, and I can hopefully do a live react to that one. So this will be interesting to see. Alrighty then, so now this is the end. Thank you everyone for watching. For whoever's stayed, I don't think really anyone did. And so, yeah. Have a good night, everyone.